If you have questions, feel free to use the chat function, which you can find at the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. Just type in there, make sure it's to everyone, or you can direct it directly to Karen if you'd like. During the actual Q&A, we ask that everyone try and use the raise hand function. So if you click on the participants tab at the bottom right-hand corner, scroll to your name, and there'll be a little hand next to your name. Just click that. That will notify us that you have a question. There's also a comment sheet available on the website. I'll go into a little bit more detail at that at the end. And for now, I'll pass it over to Jonathan to get the presentation started.
Okay. Thank you, Daniel. So I will start sharing the presentation with everyone. So good afternoon. Welcome to PICA number 2, as Daniel mentioned, for the Township of King Comprehensive Stormwater Management Master Plan. I'm here, Jonathan Kirschbaumer, with my colleague, Karen Edgington. We are from Civica Infrastructure and working with the King Township to develop the Stormwater Master Plan. The purpose of today's Public Information Center is to present the residents of the township with the preferred solution for addressing existing and potential stormwater management issues resulting from planned growth within the township. And so I guess the first question is what is a stormwater master plan and what is its purpose? Essentially, the Stormwater Management Master Plan, it serves as a planning and guidance tool for the management of stormwater runoff in the township. From the 2019 King Township Official Plan, there's been established a guideline for growth and development within the township. This increased development and ongoing climate change, there's potential for increased stormwater runoff, which will directly impact the built and natural environment within the township. Therefore, there's a need for a plan to deal with the potential impacts of increased stormwater. And this Stormwater Master Plan will serve as a tool to facilitate the protection and restoration of natural watershed functions, protect surface and groundwater systems, facilitate maintenance of stormwater infrastructure, implement stormwater regulations for new and redevelopment areas, promote runoff reduction, improve water quality, quantity, and water balance, and of course provide stormwater education and assistance to the community. And PIC number 1 was held virtually on November 27, 2020. Here we discussed in detail what the Storm Master Plan is and what the objectives are. We discussed how this comprehensive master plan meets the requirements set out for master plans based on the municipal class environmental assessment process. And we had a summary of the existing infrastructure within the township and what issues currently exist. So after review of the master plan process and the existing conditions in the township, the problem and opportunity statement for the master plan was presented. And finally, once the problems opportunity statement was presented, a discussion was held to present the alternative solutions for addressing the stormwater problems within the township. So today's discussion will follow up on that and will focus on our preferred solution and the planning process for implementation and maintenance of this solution. And so typically master plans are developed using the municipal class environmental assessment process. This process studies and identifies the potential positive and negative effects of improvement to infrastructure, in our case, stormwater infrastructure, and as well as the extensive evaluation of the impacts to the natural and social environment. Planning process is completed in 2 phases, where phase 1 was presented at PIC number 1, and the problem and opportunity statement was presented. Now in the final stages of phase 2, stormwater modeling programs have been used to analyze the results of each alternative solution. So now we're ready to present the preferred solution for implementing and receiving feedback from residents and stakeholders. And so before discussing our preferred solution, we'll just quickly reflect on the existing stormwater infrastructure and their conditions in the township. So currently, stormwater runoff in the township is controlled using traditional practices such as stormwater ponds, culverts, roadside drainage ditches, and storm sewers. The township currently owns and operates 28 stormwater management ponds, 350 kilometers of ditches, and 100 kilometers of storm sewers, and 1,500 culverts. So review and inspection of these assets show buildup of sediment, and which results in some areas being prone to flooding, which must be addressed. As development occurs, there will be a significant increase in the impervious surfaces around the township. This will result in an increase in the amount of stormwater runoff, which will cause further strain on the existing infrastructure. Our preferred solution will be implemented to relieve this existing infrastructure and guide the implementation of new infrastructure. So the alternatives that have been reviewed to address the stormwater impacts are traditional swim or the do-nothing approach, which would maintain the status quo of traditional stormwater measurements, management measures, and would see an update to stormwater infrastructure policy. And so the second alternative would be for low impact development measures. And these are systems which are used to mimic natural hydrologic processes for stormwater runoff. And they promote infiltration and evapotranspiration for the stormwater runoff. Some of these examples are your grass swales or permeable pavements, which help control the stormwater runoff. And then our final alternative was the combination of both traditional and LID measures. So using the stormwater modeling techniques, each alternative was modeled to reflect the efficiency of the alternative at meeting design targets under simulated rainfall events. Then once we see these results, these solutions are evaluated based on feasibility, so whether the application of the proposed solution is practical and affordable. We look at constructability of our preferred solution. How easy or realistic is it to construct? We look at our environmental impacts. What are the potential impacts to the environment, of course? And then we will be looking at the benefits to residents. So will the solutions help solve the swim issues in the township? And so looking at alternative one, the do nothing, we realize it is very feasible and constructible because those techniques have been put into place already, and there would not be much updating to current policy for maintaining the status quo. The issue with this is, though, we'll see a very negative impact on both the environment and benefit to residents. And this would cause further damage to our natural and built environment through flooding and high flows. So we looked at alternative number two for LID measures. So LIDs are great tools for addressing runoff concerns and mimicking the natural hydrological cycle by returning stormwater back to the groundwater and allowing that cycle to process. So modeling of this technique throughout the township, it proved effective in meeting design targets for protecting the built and natural environment. However, in order for LIDs to effectively and efficiently meet the swim criteria necessary to provide the required level of treatment, these sizes of LIDs become very large and unreasonable. These large LIDs would take up a lot of developable land and become very expensive and difficult to build once they become very large in size. So alternative number three, looking at combining the traditional and LID measures, they employ a treat, train approach to effectively and efficiently address concerns created from stormwater runoff. So where our traditional swim facilities will typically address our peak flows, and our LIDs assist in addressing runoff volumes and creating that natural hydrological cycle. So in addition to addressing the stormwater management goals, LIDs can also be integrated into the built environment and provide more opportunities for open spacer development when combined with traditional swim techniques. So we find it creates a balanced approach to create a more feasible, constructible, and have the least impact on environment and the highest benefit to residents following approach alternative number three. So after determining a preferred solution, we want to circle back and ask ourselves, why are we creating this master plan? What are our goals of our stormwater master plan? And does our plan successfully achieve these goals? So Ontario is constantly growing and adapting to growth plans for communities. As part of the township's official plan to meet provincial growth rates, there is, of course, plan development across the township. And we know that this development will increase our stormwater runoff, and we have to make a plan to mitigate the effects of this on both the natural and built environment within the township. While doing this, we also have to keep in consideration our economic and sustainability goals to guarantee long-term success when implementing. So these factors that we have to consider, of course, are increased flooding, increased pollution, increased stream erosion, and reduced groundwater recharge. So we'll get into the discussion now on how our preferred solution will address these concerns. So for erosion control, it's required for protecting natural channels from degradation caused by high flows from surface runoff. Many of the existing facilities in the township, they're not currently meeting these erosion control requirements, and implementing LIDs in combination with these will really help decrease the peak flows going to channels and become very, very useful for implementing it becomes useful to implement these LIDs especially in scenarios where there is not enough spatial or other issues preventing the upgrade of existing stormwater facilities in the township. So looking at flooding, our traditional swim facilities, they typically take up large areas of land to store stormwater runoff and flooding relief. When these facilities fill with sediment, the storage intended for stormwater is no longer available, and it causes flooding issues to the surrounding environment. So with the anticipated increase of runoff from future development, even when the maximum storage capacity is available, these existing facilities will not be sufficient for providing the flood relief required. Finding LID opportunities in combination with traditional swim facilities assists in addressing flooding issues by providing more available stormwater storage throughout the township. And so for pollution and water quality, our traditional swim facilities are effective at treating pollution and stormwater runoff, but become very costly when it comes to time to clean out. So LIDs are also very effective in phosphorus and runoff treatment for pollution. They utilize filtration and planting systems to abstract the phosphorus and sediment from stormwater. These LIDs would receive regular maintenance, which helps extend these LIDs that can't typically be done in a stormwater facility on a regular basis. So these LIDs would provide relief to the existing facilities and would increase the level of water quality treatment that's actually happening before stormwater returns back to our channels. And so for water balance, we're looking at recharging our groundwater, our available groundwater. So traditional swim facilities don't typically provide water balance in this case for returning stormwater to the ground. So we would combine our traditional swim and LIDs, and the LIDs would provide further groundwater recharge as available upstream of any traditional facilities. So this would also provide relief to those facilities by decreasing the volume and pollutants entering the facilities. Oops. And so, in order to effectively protect the natural and built environment, criteria must be set out to efficiently implement the preferred solution of combining traditional swim facilities and LIDs. Separate criteria requirements will be met for both on-site controls at future developments and end-of-pipe swim facilities on public property. So for future developments, when it comes to water quantity, all future developments will be required to implement LIDs in swim facilities to provide on-site storage to control flows from pre-development to pre-development flows, which would basically prevent any increase of volume of stormwater runoff in the township. This would be addressed on-site and prior to leaving a development. And so for erosion control on future developments, they will provide an additional storage to retain 5 millimeters of rainfall over the entire site. And this will help provide high flows from causing erosion protection downstream. So then our developments, they must pre-treat water runoff before releasing it to municipal infrastructure. The MOE has guidelines which state that 80% of total suspended solids must be removed from runoff. These phosphorus loadings must also meet the pre-development conditions to prevent increased phosphorus loadings entering the lakes and rivers in the township. And finally, future developments will be responsible for maintaining water balance to pre-development infiltration volumes. This will basically protect the groundwater recharge at these development sites. So for traditional swim facilities, implementing them, we will follow guidelines and criteria that are set out by relevant conservation authorities for the treatment based on the relevant subwatershed. So for water quantity in the Holland River watershed, we would see traditional swim facilities will be designed to store 40 cubic meters per hectare of the contributing area, and this is based on the LSRCA criteria. In the Humber River watershed, which is more of the southern area of the King Township, we'll follow volume controls to meet the Humber River unit flow relationships, which have been set out by the TRCA. Again, to prevent further erosion, these facilities will have additional storage for 25 millimeter retention to hold this volume of water for 24 to 48 hours. Again, similar to our on-site future development control, water quality will meet Ministry of Environment, 80% level of protection for phosphorus and suspended solids. And so executing these new approaches to managing stormwater, it requires an overall strategy for implementation, and it needs to identify approaches for upgrading and maintaining the facilities proposed in the preferred solution. So these relevant policies must be considered for implementing the preferred solution, both the lot level and the end of pipe level. So implementation will consider roles for all stakeholders and their responsibilities in upholding the requirements for stormwater management in the township. So at the future development lot level control, construction and funding will be, the developers will be required to fund and construct these lot level controls and LIDs during site development. And so the township will then be responsible for inspecting these constructed swim controls prior to allowing connection to municipal infrastructure, just to guarantee that they're at the level of quality that is expected. And so for the future developments, construction scheduling, it will be prior to or concurrent with site development. So typically these will have to be active before sites are developed and come into connection with the municipal infrastructure. Developers will be responsible for operating and maintaining these on-site swim controls. Their inspection and maintenance reporting will be required on a regular basis to ensure that these swim controls are being maintained and water runoff is being effectively treated prior to leaving a private site. So then the township will oversee and review all these inspection and maintenance. They will form agreements with landowners and developers to allow township staff to access on-site swim controls as necessary and ensure that the acceptable levels of operations and maintenance are being met. And so public agencies will be consulted at the detailed design stage and to ensure relevant policies and guidelines are being satisfied. And so implementing these lot level controls will require updates to site bylaws and introducing LID operation and maintenance manuals. So we will look now at our traditional swim facilities. These will be constructed and funded by developers that that require new swim facilities for future developments. The developers will provide construction and funding assistance when proposed developments are upstream and contribute runoff to existing facilities. So there will be a shared responsibility to upgrade any existing facilities that will be used for any future development. And so as well, the township will be responsible for funding the construction to upgrade existing facilities that are inadequate to meet swim criteria. So when it comes to time of cleanout, retrofit opportunities will be reviewed, and the possible implementation of upstream LIDs to these existing facilities to meet the design requirements. So scheduling for construction of these will typically occur during construction or prior to construction. So and then the townships will schedule any retrofit up and upgrades to existing facilities when they are found to be functioning as similar to like the time of facility cleanout, or if any safety issues become a concern and work is required for a facility, implementing these opportunities we will be looked at that time. And then so developers, they will be required to maintain these facilities until development is complete and the land transfer to the township is complete. And it's at this point where the township will maintain these facilities on public property throughout their life cycle and include them to an updated asset management plan as new facilities become operational. And again, so when implementing these, we'll be looking at our relevant guidelines and policies and our public agency inputs. And so these public agencies, they also are will be able to assist in recommending certain types of LIDs based on past experience. And so again, these adjustments that will come from this will be our site bylaws, LID manuals, township asset management plan, and climate change action plan to make sure that any climate change that occurs, we will be keeping this in consideration for our stormwater. And so with inspection and maintenance, previous experiences have shown that sometimes leaving the responsibility to the property owner may lead to a lack of inspection and maintenance. So conservation authorities have created management guides to enforce the level of service for lot level LIDs. And so in the Lake Simcoe Protection Plan, it states that every owner and operator of the new stormwater management works shall be required to inspect and maintain the works on a periodic basis. And every owner and operator of a new priority stormwater management works shall be required to monitor the operation of works, including the monitoring of the quality of effluent from the works on a periodic basis. So the TRCA, their LID Stormwater Management Guide, enforces a compliance monitoring where monitoring of new facilities is the responsibility of the developer to demonstrate that the requirements have been met. So these will be applied in our inspection and maintenance plan to help guide and facilitate these LIDs to have long-term effects within the township and maintain these levels of standards. And so the Sustainable Technology Evaluation Program, also known as STEP, has created some guidelines for salt management practices to help minimize contamination to stormwater runoff. So these practices will be implemented, and these STEP program guides will be used for helping facilitate this transition. And so with that STEP program, they do offer guides for inspection and maintaining of common LIDs. And so, like this table here, we see it has common operation and maintenance activities for common LIDs, and the required frequency for these maintenance activities. So these maintenance activities will be implemented in the township maintenance plan, and updates will be provided over time to typically suit the specific maintenance needs observed in the township. If we find that the frequencies and stuff are not met in our case. So stormwater management maintenance plan will focus and consider implementing inspection requirements for private developments, enforcing the maintenance requirements for private developments. They will summarize these maintenance requirements for all stormwater infrastructure that would be implemented. And then we would verify maintenance and operation is sustained through enforced inspection reporting programs and annual progress reports for status of achieving the preferred solution. So we will see once as new measures are implemented, they would be tracked, and we would see and basically guide us to on our status of meeting our goals. And then we would implement any other maintenance programs that would help prevent any issues for our stormwater facilities, such as our winter salt programs. And then, so in conclusion, for any good stormwater management master plan to be successful, the preferred solution must provide an overall strategy for stormwater management within the study area and effectively manage stormwater flow characteristics, flooding issues, water pollution, erosion control, and groundwater recharge within the subwatershed. So in order to achieve these goals set out by the master plan and address the problem and opportunity statements identified, the implementation of necessary mechanisms is required to focus on the LID requirements for new developments and create opportunities for improving the existing stormwater infrastructure. And like all structures, swim facilities and LIDs, their performance declines over time and do not operate to their intended functions once this life cycle is ended. So by implementing a maintenance program, we would extend the expected life of these and create a long-term stormwater plan that will mitigate our issues found. So with that, with the correct implementation and the right maintenance and operation, we will preserve a high quality of life within the township. And so following the stormwater master planning, we find some next steps in order to help the implementation process and focus on applying our preferred solution. So we would require the completion of class environmental assessments for any new facilities and retrofit sites. We would implement the recommended approach for all these new facilities and designs, retrofits going forward, and we would develop the policy for construction, maintenance, and operation of LIDs on private developments. And with that, I will pass it on to Daniel.
All right. Thank you, Jonathan. So we'll get into the Q&A in just a minute. Just wanted to mention back to the comment sheet. So we ask any participants to feel free to visit the Speak King website. I'll post a link in the chat where you can find the comment sheet. You can either download the Word document, fill it out, and then submit it to King Stormwater Master Plan at civi.ca, or you can use the comment sheet function that's built into the web page. If you know of anyone that wasn't able to attend the PIC, let them know that they can fill out a comment sheet and submit it to us. At this point, any comments, concerns, questions is valuable to us. The comment period will remain open until April 15th. We also encourage everyone to subscribe to the Speak King website, and this will keep you up to date with how the project progresses. Now with that said, I'm going to pass it off to Karen to start the Q&A.
All right. Double checking here. Yes. Turn my video back on. There we go. So you can see who you're talking to. So we had quite a few questions come along. We had some questions in the chat. So I think what we'll do is we'll go through those first, and then we'll open it up to everybody. So the first question we had was from David Boyd, and he asked, how about underground storage, private and public? Underground storage can definitely provide an LID feature. The biggest thing about underground storage, of course, is if you can infiltrate from the bottom of them. That's the short answer. The longer answer is it depends on the soils and it depends on your groundwater conditions. So if your groundwater is not too high and you have good soil conditions, they're an excellent way to provide some infiltration and quantity storage at the same time. So our next question was from Jennifer Anstey. And she said, what happens if the developer goes bankrupt after the development has been completed? And this is a town question. I think I know the answer.
If that happens, I think we would run into a big problem. I don't know the specifics and the legality of contracts and what's agreement. Carolyn, you're raising your hand there. I think you can unmute yourself, Carolyn.
Oh, yeah. So anyway, so I'm Carolyn Alley. I'm the manager of development services for Public Works. So I'm not. So what was the so just generally? So when we enter into a subdivision agreement with a developer, they provide full securities for the value of the work in the public right of way. So that would be the full value of the stormwater pond. So if through the development, let's say the developer runs into financial problems, then the town has the money in order to complete the project. So securities are reduced when, and maybe this is too much information, but when the development is constructed, it's been tested, we will reduce the securities, but we do hold a 20% value of the works for a 2-year maintenance period. And then after the 2 years maintenance period, part of their assumption process is they clean the pipes, clean the pond, and then at assumption they give us a stormwater facility that is left in the condition of how it was designed. So I hope that answers the question.
Sounds like it. Thanks, Carolyn.
All right. Next question we have is from Susan Behario. And she says, thank you very much. There is an application for a development in Nobleton that plans to construct a park on top of a stormwater management pond. Any comment?
Carolyn, do you have any details on this specific project?
Yes, I do. So, correct, it was draft plan approved by council, I think, on Monday night. And although this is a new technology for King, it is been done in many other municipalities. So, and I guess in those draft plan conditions, and again, draft plan conditions is about, setting the lot fabric and coming up with some, preliminary design for the infrastructure. But when we move into detailed design, that's when they will do a full stormwater design report. And then in those draft plan conditions, we do have an extended maintenance period for those facilities. So again, it's been draft plan approved, and they have, we have a more than a concept, but we will have more detailed design through the stormwater reports that come as part of the detailed design. And then that subdivision will, after all the design is done, the reports are done, then we'll enter a subdivision agreement with the developer.
So I'm curious, Carolyn, just thinking about that more. So is this a new stormwater pond and a new park? That's kind of what they're doing, or is this Are they taking an existing stormwater pond and turning it into a park and then putting an underground storage feature underneath it? Is just trying to clarify this in my mind.
It's a new build.
Okay.
It's a brand new subdivision. Yeah.
Everything's new. So yeah, so the pond will be underneath the park, basically, is what it is, but it'll be underground storage.
Right.
Okay. All right. That makes sense. Yes. Yes. And yes, people do that all the time and do that in many, many places. And it's a nice double use of land because, you know, sometimes ponds are decorative and sometimes they're nice and sometimes they're just turn into algae eyesores. So, you know, it's a nice double use of land. Next question was also from Susan, and she said, are the standards for new facilities most modern, sustainable, and good for nature? And yes, and that is how the low impact development changes that came into our whole stormwater design came about, because we realized our original stormwater, where we really wanted to try and get the water in the pipe and out to the end to the storm pond, was not the most sustainable way of doing things. So to try and use low impact development techniques tries to more naturally mimic the more natural hydrologic cycle. So we try and get water in the ground at various places within the system rather than just let's stuff it all in the pipe. And the other problem with not using low impact development is, I mean, when we pay parts of the watershed, we tend to increase the amount of runoff, the volume of runoff. So low impact development techniques tend to try and address that increase in the runoff volume as well. And Susan's other question is, what are typical LID measures? So there's a lot of different types of LID measures. I mean, a simple one is putting a rain barrel on the end of your downspout. So that captures some of the water that would come off your roof. And then you could maybe reuse that in your garden. So that's a really simple one that pretty much any homeowner could do. You could make a little rain garden at the end of where your downspout comes off, so that rather than all that water coming off your roof running out onto the road and then into the storm system, it would soak into the ground. Now, as engineers, we try and do more planned ones on top of those. So some of the other typical ones we use, if we can find the space, is we'll try and do what we call a bioretention swale. So we make a special swale, which is, it's the same thing as a ditch or a roadside ditch, but we make them special, and then we try and line them with a lot more permeable material, like a special sand mix, so that is enriched with a bit of compost, so that we can also grow plants in it. So the water that runs down that swale will hopefully soak into that liner, and it'll soak into the ground. And then also we'll plant plants in there, so the plants will take up any of the water that maybe is sitting in that soil layer. And in addition, stormwater often has other pollutants in it, so the plants are really good at dealing with those pollutants as well. So that's another way. Another one that has more limited applications, but there are places for it, is we might use like a permeable type pavement. And there's a lot of different types of permeable pavements you can use. There's your traditional pavers. They have bigger spaces in between them, so the water soaks in. You can also there's permeable asphalt, permeable concrete, and they're really good at soaking the water in. Now, they're not as good for traffic loading, so we tend not to use them in like normal roads or in drive aisles, but just in parking areas. So that's, so often in commercial applications, we find a lot of places to put permeable pavements. The other thing we can do is we can purposely design some sort of infiltration facility at the end of the pipe. So it'll take a portion of the water coming out of the piping system, and it'll go into basically what we call an infiltration facility. So we purposely design it with the right soils and the right volume to take a certain amount of runoff. So those are.
Yeah, thanks, Karen. And in terms of green technology or LID, like really the sky's the limit. There's a lot of opportunities out there. David mentioned to me on the private side, homeowners could, or businesses could look into gray water systems, which recycles the waters from like sinks, just not from the toilet sanitary type stuff. Things like rooftop storage, green roofs. As I said, the sky's the limit. It's really just finding that balance because these things can come at a premium cost. And it's just finding the most cost effective and kind of right decision for either the property or the municipality.
So Susan had a further question, and she said, will the swales be used in all future developments in King? Who plants the plants and encourages permeable pavements? So really what happens is the developer, when he goes to develop a site, he knows he has certain targets to meet, number one, with water balance, with erosion, with water quality. So he knows he's got to meet those. So he will take his targets and his engineers that he has hired to help him design the site and his planners, and then together they'll come up with whatever measures they can use on the site. And the other things that you need to look at when you're going to recommend LIDs is really, really important is number one, what's your groundwater? If you have high groundwater, that causes you takes out a lot of your options, or if you have really, really tight clay soils, that takes out some of your options. But in general, so the developer will kind of look at what's going to work with, number one, how does he want to use the site and what are the soil conditions and the groundwater conditions on the site. And they'll come up with a suite of possibilities that work the best for that site.
So on that, I can add that yes, all of the submissions that are coming in. So again, King City East is a big development, and they are moving through their design, and their designs do include low impact development in order to meet their water balance. So yes, we are definitely seeing it more proposed in new development submissions.
So David Boyd has a question. He says, please confirm one of the potential benefits of developing a swim is the possibility of the reduction in TRSA floodplain limits. What is the likelihood of this occurring based on what you've noticed in other municipalities? Low impact development tends to deal with more the smaller storms, whereas so that's like a 25 millimeter rainfall, whereas floodplain limits, especially in King, are based on Hurricane Hazel, which was 212 millimeters of rainfall. So, I mean, if we take out 25 millimeters of rainfall and soak it into the ground, that'll help a little bit, but realistically, it's not going to do too much in reducing your floodplain limits, except in very limited opportunities and areas. It's just the floodplain is based on a really large rainfall.
And we don't typically build in known floodplain areas,
No,
correct?
that's the other thing too. Yes. I mean, all new development in a floodplain, TRCA or LSRCA would say, no, I'm sorry, you're not going to do that. They have a regulated limit, and they are quite firm about you staying out of it.
Carolyn?
So I'm wondering, Councillor Boyd, if the question is also about, doing a master plan and identifying areas of uncontrolled flow. Is it that, if we came up with a program and could not control the uncontrolled flow, but, treat or could that impact flood plain limits. And then I just wanted to add on that is that, LSRCA is spearheading a project where it's called their Stormwater Management Optimization Project, and they are looking at, watersheds as a whole, right? So what infrastructure improvements can be done upstream in another municipality that would benefit the downstream. And so, they've kind of done the planning and they're moving into their implementation. And so again, I think one of those questions would be, if LSRCA is spearheading, this optimization within the watershed, is there an opportunity for floodplain reduction? So I'm wondering if that was the context.
That's more the context that I was getting at, Carolyn. Looking in the Nobleton area, we've had some expansion, and the lines of the TRCA have grown within the municipality, right? And I just want to make sure that that's known and that there's focus given to what we don't want to see is further expansion. If there's something that we can do or control within the municipality's purview, or infrastructure enhancements or maintenance, right? So I'm hoping that this plan, we're going to look holistically, kind of like you've said, with the organizations looking at broader, right? I'm hoping that we're looking at the whole municipality and, what effects do rain runoff from Schaumburg or some of the farmer fields north of Nobleton have on our infrastructure, and, how do we design and make sure that we're meeting those needs in the future as a municipality takes shape, because we've got to also think about our existing neighborhoods, right, where we're starting to have issues, right? I mean, that's where, as the ward councillor, I get most of my feedback is that, people see streams swelling that, swell more regularly than they did in the past because we're having higher incidents of rainstorm. And, if it's a once a year or once every 5 years that you see a stream in your backyard swell, then okay, that's kind of what we've been accustomed to. But now when we're seeing this occur 3, 4, 5 times a year, it's certainly creating some concern for my residents. And I hear that as a councillor as well. Just while I've got my mic on, and then I'll sit back a little bit. A second question that I had is, the other thing that I hear, and I'll just share this as a comment, is that when somebody rebuilds a home, right? Sometimes it's on existing foundation, sometimes it's not. But we need to make sure that we give our staff the tools to make sure that, and I know it's supposed to be, the water is supposed to be contained, but is this a tool or a vehicle to help us strengthen some of the ability our staff have to manage when somebody rebuilds a house and make sure that they're not having an effect on the neighboring properties? Thanks.
Yeah, good questions. Karen, if you wanted to talk a little bit about some of the modeling we've done in the scenarios where current conditions versus post-development conditions.
So we have done modeling. We've modeled the entire watersheds, both LSRCA and TRCA. So we've modeled all the watersheds. We've modeled existing conditions. We've modeled the future conditions with no controls, so we can kind of see what would be the impact of just going all out and developing and doing nothing. And then we've also done a couple of different scenarios with controls and using just general controls, using LIDs, and then we even looked at a really expanded LID trying to meet water balance, and just trying to see what the impacts of those were. And it was very favorable using the LIDs for as far as the pollution removal capabilities for phosphorus, for total suspended solids. Our modeling didn't show, if we just use typical LIDs for a 25 millimeter storm, that we necessarily met all of the water budget, but it's such a broad general model that it was kind of hard to, it's kind of hard to see. So we did run a scenario where we thought, okay, what would happen? What would you, for instance, just to make our model work, need to do to meet all the water budget within the watershed? And it was pretty prohibitive, the size of the LIDs required. But that being said, on an individual basis, each developer will need to meet their water budget anyway. So we just kind of wanted to see what was the impact on a watershed type basis. The other thing that we definitely will look at as part of this is what are the impacts of climate change. The interesting thing anecdotally, well, not anecdotally, but I know in this area there have been a lot of IDF curves, which is intensity, duration, frequency, because Environment Canada keeps really good records on all the rainfalls. And so the long-term trend is actually not that there's an increase in the amount of rainfall. There has been some switches in kind of when the rainfalls are happening. And I know over the past few years, we have had a lot of more frequent kind of thunderstorms, summer type events. So that's kind of anecdotally. So overall, I don't think our rainfall is increasing. It may be more when it's happening, and the timing of it is also has been some change. But as part of the study, we will be doing, we do look at the climate change impacts.
Okay, thank you. Tony has been waiting patiently. I just wanted to jump to him before we go
Thank
into
you.
any more of the ones.
Yes.
Thank you. Question: were the floodplains part of the study area?
Yes, we have mapping of all the floodplains.
But were they included in the study area? I know
Yes.
you have the
Yes.
mapping. They were.
No, they were included in our study area. Yes, they were.
Were culvert capacities included in that?
We haven't looked at individual culvert capacities as part of this right now.
Okay, I'm on a floodplain, and there's a definite issue with the culvert capacity at the end of the culvert crossing under King Road.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a comprehensive study, and I'm wondering why isn't that being looked at? Because if these ponds fail in the new developments, they are going to overflow and the water is going to travel south onto the floodplains. So what is going to happen to our properties?
So, Tony, that's a very valid concern. So as I mentioned, this master plan, comprehensive, it's, again, higher level. So
I was assured by Boyd, I was assured by Councillor Boyd and Mayor Pellegrini that this culvert and water course would be in the study of this area would be included in this study.
So part of this, again, we have our preferred solution. So when we look at this specific culvert, we are going to take into consideration and look at how we can develop a new project or a retrofit, or maybe it just needs some cleaning, who knows, but we will definitely take that in consideration and include our proposed solution in whatever project comes out of that.
Fair enough.
Again,
now,
yep.
What soil conditions do we have in Nobleton? It's my understanding that we have a very high water table and that LIDs would really not be beneficial or effective because of the high water table. Is that correct?
I'm seeing here that it's predominantly clay in Nobleton. So again, as Karen was saying, I don't think that's favorable for LIDs. But again,
well, it depends
LIDs.
It depends on the type, really.
Exactly.
I mean, yeah, for example, what I was referring to, if you're trying to do an underground storage system and you had a really high groundwater system, because you're usually pushing your storage underground. Now you're going to be running you had a high groundwater table there. Now you'd be running into the groundwater table. So whenever I've done those before, if it's high groundwater, I usually end up having to line it because, of course, you're not going to get any storage if it fills up with groundwater.
Correct.
So that would be a situation where you wouldn't say, okay, I can't use an underground storage tank here. This isn't going to work that well. So I might then try and look at, okay, well, what could I do on the surface? So then I might look for example, opportunities to put in permeable pavement. I might look for opportunities to put in a bioswale because I can pull that up higher. So it's always a very site-specific thing. And then even with clay soils, they're not as good. we'd all love as engineers to have lovely sand to just soak all our water into and have it disappear in 30 seconds flat. But even a clay soil will take quite a bit of it'll take quite a bit of infiltration. And I know TRCA has done a lot of studies on clay soils and how much water uptake happens with clay soils. So we can design around that. And usually when we do our designs, we also apply a factor of safety of 2.5 to 3. So really what happens when you have tight soils is your LID that you're designing gets bigger and bigger because you want a bigger contact area, you want and you realize the water isn't going to go in as fast because we also put limits on how fast we want it to drain down. We don't want the water sitting there forever. So those are all the sorts of things that the designer of a particular site has to look at and kind of come to grips with and come up with something that works. And I mean, there's even been, instances where, I've seen you might end up doing things like an underground storage tank that's sealed, and then you reuse the water for irrigation. I know we've done that in, downtown Toronto and stuff like that.
But I understand
pavement everywhere.
But I understand that, but these are all established areas. So our limit as to what we're going to put underground is fairly limited, and as well as to impose something like this on a homeowner to save their property from flooding or mitigate water could be a real expense.
Actually, we weren't advocating this for the homeowner to do. This is for new development.
Okay, for new development. But once those barrels or those storage tanks reach their capacity, they then overflow into, I guess, a stormwater system. Correct?
The
idea is to slow it down, right?
Yeah, then that stormwater system ends up on the water courses in our backyard, which there's really only 2 water courses in Nobleton, which handle all of the water that's being created in the area. So another question that I have is that what areas have been identified as possible areas subjected to flooding?
Are we there yet, Karen? I think that's kind of what we're currently working on.
We're just working through our whole implementation plan. We have all the flooding area, like all the floodplain areas from TRCA, and we're just working through our implementation plan right now of how that's all going to work out.
But isn't this then solution or the preferred solution a bit premature if we don't have that information as yet?
No, you start with the preferred solution, and then from there you develop the specific projects. Like, for example, Nobleton. There's obviously issues there.
Yes. So again, Daniel, have any areas been identified in Nobleton that have been, because I know other reports that the township has undertaken has identified several areas as being subjected to flooding.
Yes, and all those areas that have been identified, we are looking at.
Okay, thank you. I'm just extremely concerned because everything flows south.
Yeah, so, I know.
And the capacity that we have in the water courses is full of sand, and often the outlet is much higher than the inlet. So, for example, the TRCA cleaned out the culvert last year under King Road. And they only could have gone so far because it requires much further cleaning because it cannot drain the water. One more question is, you mentioned winter salt program. Can you please elaborate on that?
Yep. So I think in terms of water quality, right? That's what we were looking into when we were talking about salt, Karen.
Salt is a huge issue. I mean, the problem is once you get salt into stormwater, you can't get it out again. That's the reality. Once it gets into the water, it can't get out. But I mean,
once it goes into the culverts, you can't get that out as well, and it accumulates much faster than the salt does, because I don't know how many thousands of tons we're using of sand, and it's really ending up in the water courses. And
Yeah.
and the water courses are not able to handle what is coming down in terms of rain. This is why all these little neighborhoods are getting more and more water, is because the water cannot flow because of all the sand buildup.
Yeah, great point. So to address two of the points, so the specific things you're talking about in Nobleton sounds like maintenance, right? So part of this master plan, as we move forward, we're going to be developing a maintenance and operation plan. So, and part of that is going to be inspection of culverts and things like that, and yearly annual maintenance to make sure that it's sediment that builds up is cleaned, and these don't become problem areas. And from an operations standpoint, something we could certainly and we want to look at is the salt management plans, right? So it's very easy, and you look at things like legality and who's responsible if the roads are slippery, things like that. So the safe thing is just to throw as much sand and salt as possible, right? Where we're going above and beyond that, where we need to think intelligently and do what's safe for the public, but also what's good for the environment as well.
Yeah.
Okay, and I'm just asking you guys to please do what's safe for my property and for people in Nobleton, because our high water marks are moving higher and higher in this area. And it is, and it's really unfortunate that is happening. That I'm on a floodplain, and my water mark is almost now at the back of my back door, when a few years back it was about 15 feet out.
Wow. Yeah, that's concerning.
So
It is concerning.
It is extremely concerning. So this is why I'm asking about culvert capacities and maintenance, because if a culvert is restricted, it's going to put up the watermark on my property. So I think as a township and as a comprehensive stormwater management plan, there is an obligation on the township's part to not only look at development, new development, but to look at the existing infrastructure and the impact that it's having on the local residents. Everything is moving south. Once those stormwater ponds fill with silt, it's going to overflow, and then it's going to trickle its way down.
Absolutely.
So please, I am asking, let's deal with capacity. Let's deal with maintenance. So then people can enjoy their properties, enjoy nature, enjoy everything of the benefits of living close to a green belt. There is an obligation on the township to ensure that, and as well as the township on Civica to listen to my complaints that I am being flooded and other properties are being flooded. So everybody is aware of that. There must be some sort of a resolution to this. And as well as I would like to see the township and the region work together when a water crossing goes between goes between ownership of the township and of the region, because it is clearly an issue that one party or one region goes back and forth sometimes, and work is not done. It took 10 years to clean this culvert, which is totally unreasonable.
I hear you.
I would ask that we plan, and maintenance is very important. I thank you for your time, and I thank you for listening.
Yeah, no, thank you. Good comments.
Good comments. Debbie, do you have your hand up there?
I do have my hand up. Thank you.
You're
My
welcome.
question is, and first, this was a really good presentation. Very educational. My question is about lid measures that are for a new subdivision that is being planned, lid measures that are within individual property lots,
Oh,
such as swales or something like that.
yeah.
So, it's very nice on the drawing board, but I don't think we plan to go and monitor what those lids look like when the homeowner has been there for 3 years. And, just as we have, one of the big challenges of people who get to live with a backyard that slopes down to the Humber, we need to keep training them that no, you can't go and modify what the bank looks like. Yes, you think of it as your property, but it's regulated and the conservation authority says no. So what are we going to do with these? And we have 2 subdivisions that will be built someday in King City. I'm referring to, for the staff know who I'm talking about, the bushland property and the mansions of King. I do believe that there are lid measures that are incorporated into the backyards of properties. So what do we know about, what's the experience base for how we're going to really make sure we have those lid measures operating?
Yeah. So unfortunately, Carolyn had to sign off, who's our development expert. But yeah, it's a very good point. So something we would need to do is some sort of tracking to make sure, and this would be part of our maintenance program. So as you said, we need to also create communication initiatives to inform individuals and to enforce, our bylaw enforcements to make sure that they are actually inspecting these and keeping them maintained. So these are all things that, yes, we definitely need to look at, and we may certainly have things in place at this point in time for new developments, but I can't speak to that. We'll have to refer to Carolyn.
I can kind of speak to what experience, and this is not within the township of King, but I've experienced this whole issue in other areas and other, because it goes on everywhere. So and it's a really thorny issue, and it's a hard thing for both the township to try and deal with, because number one, they don't necessarily want easements everywhere, and the homeowners don't want easements everywhere. I do know in one subdivision that I was involved with in the design and approval of in another municipality was some of the measures we took were, number one, there was something registered on the homeowner's title that basically they had this back there and they were to keep it. The developer wasn't very happy about that. The other thing is, every homeowner in that subdivision, they got a brochure that came with their purchase to basically try and inform and educate them about it. I know both the Ministry of the Environment, MECP, plus the conservation authorities are investigating use of they've kind of leaned towards the Drainage Act, the Municipal Drainage Act, to try and allow the township to have some sort of stick to wield, I should say, as far as enforcement, without actually having an easement. So that's what everyone has kind of been leaning towards, is using the Drainage Act.
Sounds messy.
It is. It's not the easiest of things. The good thing is, or the thing I know about the 1 or 2 subdivisions that I've been involved in, and the other way I've gotten around with that is pushed it. We've pushed those measures in other subdivisions I've been involved with in design.
They broke their thing. They're going to be back tomorrow. Yeah.
Is we've pushed it off of the private property onto the public property, because these were lots that say backed onto the water course or the channel and stuff. So then that allows the township a spot to actually have ownership and be able to go in there and maintain it. So that's another way. I know often with the ones, especially in the rear yards, is they're generally just taking the rear roof drainage, so it's not a huge amount of drainage anyways, and all the majority of the drainage comes from the roads and the driveways within the subdivision, and they have to be on something that's on public property because just of where they sit. So the risk with something like that, I know someone's going to go put in a pool and dig it out, but but the risk is generally smaller for the amount of drainage that it is. So, it is an evolving thing, and I agree, it's kind of a thorny issue.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, you mentioned digging it, while you're constructing a pool. The other phenomena, it seems to me, is it's not just the roof; it's also the terracing and all that work that goes. And that's one of our, challenges. Again, as we do have in our bylaws percentage of impermeable, et cetera, but of course that just keeps being eaten away at. And so it really does require that we're very vigilant on any sort of variances and things like that. But just while on I think a very simple question, in the presentation, a couple times it was referred to private development, what we'll do. I just want to confirm that for development that is for the municipality, such as new recreation centers and municipal centers, we put the same obligations on our own development for maintenance and things like that?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Yeah, thank
Again,
you.
really great presentation.
Okay, is there any other questions hanging around?
I think we've got most of them. Well, actually, I apologize. There is one from Susan that I know I missed because I think we kind of went to Tony for a bit. And she was asking about, in a lot of the existing subdivisions and stuff like that, and I think what she's getting at, is there possibility to provide retrofits of the roadside swales and stuff like that to provide LID measures in them?
So in terms of subdivision,
I think in the existing built areas.
Yeah, so there's the existing public land and then private land. In terms of public land, if we do identify a problem, there's always opportunities to upgrade things. Whether it just be simple maintenance or an entire project. In terms of private property, that goes back into the bylaw enforcement, the Drainage Act enforcement, those kind of things. So it goes back to what Debbie was saying, where we have the standards and things in place. Now it's just enforcement and being diligent of identifying these things and making sure that they're taken care of before they become a problem. Okay, so something about no planting in swales. So that was we spoke about that when we talked about LIDs, and it's certainly an option. But if you look at a swale, and just because there's not necessarily planting doesn't mean it's not effective. It could be doing its job as designed, and permeating small amounts of water in and directing the water where it needs to go. Again, if we identify an area that there's too much overflow, we could certainly look into that and put it on the list of projects that need to be happening. If I don't know if that answers your question, Susan.
Okay. Oh, hi, Debbie.
Put my hand up again. I didn't know if you noticed it was a new hand. What is the maintenance procedures for permeable pavers?
After a few years, you have to come along with a vacuum truck and you vacuum them, a special vacuum truck, and you basically you vacuum up all the soil in the top layer of soil, and then they'll have to put in a little bit more of the granular material in between again.
So, so I guess the question is, in King, we have that because we have permeable pavers now, and so is that something we do have in our maintenance program?
We'll need to definitely consider that, and
Okay.
if it's not in there, make sure we put it in. And I think that goes back to, LIDs are great, but we need to be able to maintain them, and we need to be able to have the budget to maintain them, right?
Yes.
So it's all part of that balance of what we decide to use when we look at these projects.
Agreed.
Yeah, it doesn't do much good to put in all the stormwater measures in the world if you don't maintain them.
Okay.
All right.
All right, guys, I guess that's it. So thank you, everyone, for participating. And again, feel free to fill out a comment sheet, and we'll let you know as the project progresses.
All right.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for attending.
Thank you.
All right.